there are actually ad platforms out there besides Google? I'm kidding, of course, but this is the Inside Google Ads podcast. I'm your host, Jill Saskin-Gales, a Google Ads coach, and so we talk about Google Ads. Now, in a minute, I'm going to hand the mic over to someone who's going to tell us what's new with some of the other ad platforms out there and share her perspective on what the features and capabilities of other ad platforms can tell us about Google. If you're not familiar with Navah Hopkins, you are in for a treat. She is one of the veterans of our industry. Currently, she's the brand evangelist at Optimizer, Search Engine Journal's Ask a PPC columnist, and she runs her own consulting practice. She's also the number 3 most influential PPC expert in the world. No big deal. But what I admire so much about Navah, and the reason I asked her to join us on the podcast, is not only that she's one of the most kind and thoughtful and generous people, because she is, but she's the most reliable source of information in our industry. Seriously, there are so many people out there who will say Lord knows what to grab your attention. But if Navah says something, whether it's a piece of news or a feature announcement, I know it's true. She does her research, she has the experience, and she always brings valuable analysis and perspective to the information she shares. In fact, this is a true story. Navah once messaged me on a Saturday morning in my LinkedIn DMs because she saw something I had written about quality score. And she was so kind. She wasn't trying to do a gotcha or anything, but she just said like, hey, I love this perspective. I can't seem to find it backed up anywhere in the documentation. Do you mind sharing your source with me? And it was a conclusion I had drawn from various sources. So we went back and forth a bit, ended up hopping on a call on a Saturday morning to sort out whether Navah was going to accept my logic or not about the relationship between ad strength and quality score. For the record, she didn't, but that's the kind of friend and kind of expert that Navah is. And it's why I always trust what she says and eagerly anticipate seeing what she'll say next. By now, you are eagerly anticipating hearing from Navah and not me. So let's hand the mic over to Navah Hopkins for Inside Google Ads, episode 28, Microsoft, Meta, and Amazon ads.
Well, Jill, thank you so much for having me. For those of you who don't know, I'm Navah Hopkins. I'm the evangelist over at Optimizer. I get to work with hundreds of thousands of accounts globally, many different verticals, many different ad channels. And that's actually what I want to talk about with you and your audience today, which is how to take the beyond Google channels, how they're being developed, how to think about their rules of engagement, and shore up some kind of mechanics within Google. So the first one I want to talk about is Performance Max. So for those of you who don't know, Performance Max is kind of a catch-all campaign type that's meant to take the bias out of our decisions in terms of targeting, our biases in terms of where budget goes, and say, hey, ad platform, here's money, here are creative assets. Based off of the goal of conversions, go find me the best possible placements. Now, what's really interesting is that while Google exclusively focuses on conversions, where you have to have either max conversions or max conversion value, Microsoft's Performance Max actually has a secret hack where if there isn't enough conversions, they'll actually run off of max clicks. So what that means is that a business that would potentially struggle on Google to use Performance Max could actually really thrive on the Microsoft side. This is doubly true because Microsoft doesn't actually do video creative. So where everyone's crying and struggling with, I can't do video, video's too hard, video's too scary, this is annoying. Well, good news, Microsoft actually enables you to do that. So 100%, a really good tip is if you are struggling to make Performance Max work and the main cause is conversions, try importing it over to Microsoft. I'm not going to lie, Microsoft's volume is a little bit lower, but when it comes to the quality of conversions, and granted, you're not going to necessarily have as many conversions. If you're struggling on the Google side, you might not have them on Microsoft side either, but there's a path to victory with Performance Max. The next consideration is the mechanics of match types and exclusions and kind of how to think about that. So when we're thinking about search versus when we're thinking about social, search tends to be a game of I'm going to target kind of what I want, but the real game is a game of exclusions, thinking about who do I exactly don't want. I made this point during my MozCon talk, talking about Gale and Astarion and how Gale doesn't like to really reveal a lot of himself, but he'll respect absolutely all of your needs and wants. So Google, similarly, will really do a very, very good job of you say, I don't want these keywords. In fact, they now have that new rule with negatives now accounting for misspellings. If you don't want this particular audience group, cool, amazingly respect that. With social, on the other hand, social recently did away with the demographic exclusion. So you can still target, have fun, target all the people you want, but you better be very, very clear and specific about exactly who you want. So if you're struggling to think about what to exclude, take a stab at actually building, but don't actually run any ad spend, your audience on Meta and actually build out those audience lists, because the process of thinking through exactly who you want can actually be very, very powerful. And a bonus tip with audiences, Amazon's audiences are second to none. I make no secret of the fact that I am in love with Amazon's audiences. And the reason why I'm in love with them, they are Amazon's audiences. So where Google and Microsoft and Meta and LinkedIn kind of have to deal with, well, privacy regulations, Amazon at this point, it's still their audiences. They haven't been regulated. Now, those regulations may come. They might, but it's still a really valuable, viable option. So when it comes to Amazon's audiences, you have Amazon Garage, you have Whole Foods shopping data, you have Amazon Prime watching data, and then of course you have purchasing patterns based off of either what people have purchased or seen, and you can even add the filters of what types of products. Now, why that's super interesting, if you're a lawyer and you want to get leads and you can't necessarily target because it's a sensitive topic, suddenly you can target off of someone's Amazon Garage history that they're suddenly going to get their car repaired, that do you need a lawyer? And it's on the Amazon page, and it's with the Amazon network, which includes Twitch and IMDb. The other thing that's very powerful is travel. So there's a lot of really great travel hints that happen with purchasing patterns that you can target. So all of that's to say, when you're thinking about your targeting with something like Amazon or something like Meta, that's a really useful way to not only think about growing your audience that could then be retargeted to on Google, it's also a really helpful way to think about negatives that you may want to add, audiences that you may want to use as exclusions. So definitely make sure that you're not only using campaigns to grow your business and to drive sales and leads, you're also using it to explore. The final thing I'll talk about is understanding how conversion tracking works by platform and making sure that you're actually importing the right conversion actions and reporting correctly. Here's the kind of problem that happens a lot. Everyone agrees that conversions are conversions, but not everyone agrees about the exact action that you take and what value you should assign to that, and whether you should be sharing those values with the ad platform. So on the Google side, we have something called primary and secondary conversions. Primary conversions are going to speak to the algorithm. They're going to speak to your reporting. They're going to actually influence it. Secondary ones will not. You can have whatever you want be primary or secondary. Most other ad platforms don't actually let you do this. You just import wholesale your conversion actions, and you have to say what conversion values you want versus not. So why this is important: if you're doing imports, say from Google to Microsoft, and you're importing your conversion actions, you want to make sure that on the Microsoft side, you don't suddenly start running your secondary conversion actions. And then also when you're thinking about just different conversion actions that and how they're laid out in, say, your analytics with GA4 with Meta or with LinkedIn or Amazon or whatever, that your source of truth is consistent. So what a lot of my customers on the optimizer side have seen is that they'll shore up that data by using a CRM as a source of truth, and then import that into whatever ad platform, so that you're not necessarily saying, well, this ad platform says this, and SEO says this, and email marketing says this, No, you have one single source of truth that can be checked against each individual ad platform. So you're able to honor the different mechanics of how the ad platforms work.
That was a great overview. Thank you, Navah. So something you said right at the beginning there really piqued my interest. It was how you described what Performance Max is, because I've never heard it described that way before. And you said it takes the bias out of that media buying process. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So what's really fascinating, Jill and I both are very lucky that we get to sit with ad platform product managers and give feedback and all that. And in one of the product sessions, I was sitting, and this is actually where it came from. We were saying it would be great if we could say, we don't want video, or we don't want display, or we only want these channels within our Performance Max. And we were asked, why don't you want it? And we were like, well, we want only leads and sales oriented channel media buys. And like, well, are you saying that video can't do that? And then that's when it hit all of us, like, you know what? We are thinking that way. A lot of us think about video as just top of funnel. It's not going to be the thing that drives conversions, but that's not necessarily true. There are a lot of great video type ad buys that you can do that 100% will drive leads and sales. Just like there are some text ad campaigns that are not going to be the things that are driving leads and sales. They're there to be there, or they're there to start the journey, but they're not going to be the thing that actually gets you to buy. So taking the bias out of assumption that certain ad buys are for top of funnel, certain ad buys are for bottom of funnel is super useful. The other piece to it too is that there's a certain fear that I notice a lot of advertisers have when it comes to visual content. And whether that's because of brand standard, whether that's a fear of looking bad, whether that's a concern that they haven't produced something good, whatever it might be. And taking the bias out of it and just letting the budget do its thing and getting the data back and then seeing what those results are is a much more powerful way to then understand, okay, video is not for me. I'm going to make sure that I just back out of Performance Max entirely and just run those standalone campaigns, or saying like, you know what? Not only was that really interesting and great performance, I may want to then take some budget and run a standalone video campaign that will actually have specific targeting. Now, I've leaned very aggressively into video in this example. It applies to Discover as well. It applies to display. It applies to local. But video tends to be the biggest source of bias where people are just, they get stuck.
It's a great point. And something I say that seems counterintuitive is like Performance Max will do exactly what you tell it to do. Like, even though it's the format where we have the least control, you give it stuff, you tell it to maximize conversions, and it will maximize conversions. So like I was auditing a Google Ads account 2 weeks ago, and I saw that their Performance Max campaign was essentially a brand campaign. Like all of the conversions had come from branded search themes. Pretty much all the inventory was going on search. None of the images or video had served. And that's not what the agency wanted to do when they set it up, but because of the way, that's how it's going to get the most conversions, is by going on branded searches. It wasn't doing the wrong thing. It just wasn't doing what you thought it would do because of our bias about how these things work. So I think that's a great point there about bias.
And so long as you say what you don't want, and because Google will respect it. If you say, I don't want brand terms, I don't want my existing customers, Google will respect that. Now, there is a caveat to this. From a privacy standpoint, if the user isn't logged in or they say they don't want to be tracked, it is possible your existing customers may see your creative. But by and large, and I think the last time the stat was run, it was around a 70% match rate to a list that you give to Google, it will be able to match. Now, I realize that this main topic was about beyond Google, but that is a really important mechanic to remember, is that different channels will have different match rates based off of how many people are on those systems and how many people tend to consent or not consent to tracking. So Google actually has a pretty strong record for getting that consent. Not everyone does. So that's another thing to consider, that when you're using your lists for targeting or for excluding or for seed audiences and things like that, you just want to be mindful.
And then one more thing I wanted to ask you about is Amazon ads, because we often think of, Amazon sellers advertise on Amazon. And I think it's still a newer idea in the marketplace that a travel company or a lawyer might advertise on Amazon. So could you just give us a little bit of the 101 of like, what does that look like if an advertiser who's not an Amazon seller wants to get started advertising on Amazon? What are some of those options and decisions?
Absolutely. Well, I will shamelessly plug, you can be an Optimizer customer and you can build it through us. Shameless plug done. For everyone else, you can go to Amazon. It's absolutely free to set up. There's no setup charges or fees. What you'll do is you'll need to go through a business verification to confirm that you are, in fact, the person who should be running the ad account. And the reason that Amazon did this is that they saw that there was a lot of fraud going on in other ad platforms. So they made sure that you either are an agency running campaigns for your clients or you are the brand owner, and you can do invoicing if you would like, or you can run it straight through. Next, we have the creative. So the creative is going to be just like building a display campaign or responsive display campaign. You can put in a couple of different images, a couple of different headlines. The character count is about 90 for your kind of long headline, and then it's 60 for your short. So you get a little bit more room to talk about who you are and what you want to do. And then the logo is going to be, I believe they have it at 30 characters. It might be a little bit smaller. I have to confirm. You'll then make sure that you're targeting your audiences. So audiences are going to be or statements. So it's not yet an and statement. We've registered that we want and statements, but currently it's an or statement. And what's really great is that the bid for the audience cannot exceed 50% of the budget. So Jill and I both have a very common through line of your bid to budget ratio cannot violate the 10% rule, or if you want to be more aggressive, like the 30 or 40% rule. Amazon has that built in. And that's one of the reasons that actually I fell in love with it. It's like, you are protecting people from themselves. I love this. Because if you're bidding, say, $5 on an audience and your budget is $6, there's no possible way you're going to get anything of use. So you want to make sure that you set your bids and budgets appropriately. Amazon does a very good job of telling you how many people are available in the said audience. You can target by city, by state, by country. Currently, it's only available in the US, so you're targeting the US. And then the final step is just hitting play and seeing your campaigns run. Now, if you're doing a lead gen ad, you will need to include a privacy policy. If you're doing traffic to your site, then it's fine. You don't necessarily need a privacy policy. But for those of you looking to do auto or travel or legal or HVAC or plumbing or beauty services or any of the amazing things that Amazon supports, you probably will want to do their lead gen ad type. And the reason for that is that Amazon's conversion tracking and attribution is a little bit wonky. So from a lead capture standpoint, being able to really make sure that you're tracking everything, it'll be a little bit easier to attribute if you're using the lead gen ad type. But as they improve their attribution, as they improve all of their conversion tracking technology, you'll definitely be fine to send the traffic directly to your site.
You have my wheels spinning now. I'm like, ooh, maybe people who have bought books about Google ads, I should advertise my Google ads course to them. Like, I'm definitely going to have to test this out.
It's like, I have been beating the Amazon drum since last year, and it blows my mind that it's only now just starting to really gain traction. But yeah, the Optimizer team is actively in conversation with the Amazon product team. We're constantly building. So if you have thoughts or ideas of how you like to explore, definitely let us know and we'll happily explore it.
And so along that line, Navah, people want to learn more about you and follow you, which I highly recommend they should. Where's the best place for them to find you?
So the absolute best is on LinkedIn. I am an avid sharer of things on LinkedIn. I also do the monthly Ask the PPC column at Search Engine Journal, also occasionally contribute to Search Engine Land as well. The Optimizer PPC Town Hall is a great resource. I'm still technically on Twitter /X, but I'm not nearly as active there. I'm on TikTok. You can follow me. I should be more active there. There's a ghost Instagram profile that I keep meaning to revive, and so I'm saying it so that I'll revive it, is PPC Puppy, which is advice from my dogs, HK, Freya, and Momo. So if you don't want to hear the advice from me, you can hear from my dogs, and it's good. And then, just I'm always happy to help. I genuinely love seeing people succeed. And so if you have a question, I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Navah.
Thank you for having me.
Navah has inspired me to test out Amazon ads for the first time. I'm sure she's inspired you as well. The links to everything Navah mentioned, including her social profiles and how to get started with Optimizer, are in the episode description. I'm featuring even more guests over the next few episodes to share their expertise on Google Ads topics that fall outside of my expertise. To make sure you don't miss a thing, sign up for the Inside Google Ads episode transcripts at free.jill.ca. That's JYLL.ca. I'm Jill Saskin-Gales, and I'll see you next time with my next guest inside Google Ads.